guys. So today I'm going to be talking about a topic that I don't think I've seen anyone else really cover, and it's basically whether or not reptiles have personalities or not. And a lot of people disagree, but I personally think that they do have different personalities, and it's very important to keep that in mind when you want to keep a reptile as a pet. So when it comes to the topic of whether or not reptiles have personalities, a lot of people will think that that's basically just anthropomorphism, and you're just basically putting your human feelings and emotions onto animals and saying that they portray those as well, when that's not really what's happening. Obviously, reptiles can't express emotions the same way that we as humans can, but there are ways to read them and understand how they're feeling and what they may need. And that's very important to pick up on if you're going to be keeping a reptile as a pet, because you are going to be the one responsible for giving them everything that they need, and you need to understand their behaviors to realize when they could potentially be sick or injured or just have any issues that need to be addressed. So something that I want to go over with all of this is basically that when I give my care guides and when you guys do your own research because you're looking for a reptile, you're going to look up things such as like their behaviors and how they are with handling and if they're good eaters, because these are all very important components that go into keeping a reptile as a pet. And you want to make sure that you have the best reptile that will fit all of the things that you know you can provide for the animal. But there's always going to be exceptions to those rules, so that's something to keep in mind. Bearded dragons, for instance, are known to just like love handling, be super calm and good and chill. They aren't really aggressive. But there's always going to be some bearded dragons that are more scared than others, and they will react differently. During breeding seasons, also bearded dragons could get a little bit crazy at that time and act way more aggressive. So, but generally they aren't, so that is why they are always talked about so highly. But you have to realize that you could get a bearded dragon that may not behave the same way that they're generalized. So another thing to keep in mind is basically how they eat. Ball pythons are known to not be the greatest of eaters because they're known to go off of feeding. Again, that doesn't mean that if you have a ball python, that certainly will happen. There are ball pythons that are great eaters. There are others that, again, generally just go off of feeding. There are other types of snakes, like such as the Brazilian rainbow boa, just basically all boas in general. They seem to be great eaters, and that is something that is highly appealing to people that want to own a snake as a pet because they don't want to have to worry about their snake not eating. But again, if you have a sick animal or the husbandry is off, the snake may not eat. And it's also a possibility that your snake is just a picky eater because every single animal behaves a little bit differently. And that's the exact point that I want to get across in this video. So I own a lot of crested geckos, and they're each different. And when I say that, literally every single one of them, I say that they each have their own personality. You're okay, buddy. They each behave differently. Some of them can eat by hand feeding. Others don't want to hand feed, and they're like secretive eaters. Some of them are okay with handling. Others are not. So, I mean, you never know what you will get. They are generally great with handling. They can be jumpy, but you're always going to get some crested geckos that are a little bit more scared than others. So I get a lot of messages with people asking me basically like, how can I tame down my crested gecko? He's so scared of me all the time. What can I do? And honestly, that's just that gecko's personality. So there's not really much you can do. You can try and work with that animal and overcome that fear and get them more comfortable with you. But you could also just be stressing them out, and it's not really going to do them any good. So, I mean, it's just best to respect the animal and do what's best for them and realize that you are not going to get the animal that you think you may be getting just based off of generalizations for that entire species. So veiled chameleons like Banba here are typically known to be very, very mean and aggressive, and they hate handling. But this guy is actually pretty chill. He does have his moments where he's feisty, but for the most part, he actually likes to come out. He doesn't like sitting in his enclosure all day, and he can be very social and very cool with other people handling him, as long as obviously you treat him with respect. But yeah, he's not aggressive right now whatsoever. He's out and about just looking around. But again, there are other chameleons that are generally just not really going to like that handling and be very feisty. So it's just very important to do your research and realize that each reptile will behave differently, and it's not going to go along with the generalizations that you're going to read on the care guides. Each one really does have its own personality. That's why it's one of the reasons why I have so many animals and I just love them so much. It's because you really fall in love with each individual animal because they are so different from one another. You may think that all crested geckos are the same, all corn snakes are the same, all blue-tongued skinks are the same. Each one is its own individual. They will have their own food preferences, their own behaviors, their own feelings about handling. Again, I'm using the word feelings, which isn't really appropriate for reptiles, but it's very obvious when an animal does not want to be handled. Reptiles will let you know when they are upset. That is never something you will have to be curious about or confused. They make it very obvious through hissing and just being in an aggressive state. So you will obviously pick up on that and realize when they are unhappy. So when you get your animal, the one thing that I always suggest is to get one at a reptile show so that way you can handle it, you can talk to the breeder, you can get a little bit more of an idea of how that animal behaves and if it's something that you can handle within captivity. Something to keep in mind though, when you are handling an animal at a show, those animals can typically be very stressed out, or they could be cold, so they won't react as if they normally will, like if they're in their normal environment. So just something to keep in mind. If you're checking out an animal and you think that it's super tame and it's very cool and you can handle it when you bring it home, there's a chance that it will behave a little bit differently once you get it home and when it's in the proper environment that it's supposed to be. Because if an animal is scared, they may react more aggressively or less aggressively. But again, reptiles need their heat. A lot of times they aren't going to have that heat at a show, so they may be cold and a little bit less responsive to stimuli. So that's just something to keep in mind as well, because you need to be sure that if it does end up being a little bit more aggressive than you intended to have, you still are taking on the responsibility of having that animal once you bring it home. The same thing happened to me with Chancho, my blue-tongued skink. I wasn't aware that he was wild caught, and I held him at the show and he was super calm, behaving very well, and then I brought him home and he has been feisty ever since and absolutely hates being held. So it's just something that happens. You just need to be aware of that and be aware that whatever animal you're going to be getting, it will have its own defining features. If it has preferences in food or anything like that, there's nothing wrong with your animal. It's just common. These guys like certain things. It's very funny. That's why owning them is just so entertaining for me. Like, you never know what you're gonna get, and you form an individual relationship with every single animal because they are individuals. So that's pretty much everything for my spiel today. I just wanted to make this more aware because I keep getting like all of these questions saying like, this is how this animal is supposed to be, but my animal's like this. So, I mean, it comes down to basically just understanding that they're all different and basically understanding when you need to know if the behavior of your animal means that it could potentially be sick and it's time to go to a vet. So with all that said, I would love to hear your thoughts on this subject. Do you think that animals have personalities, reptiles in particular? They are very hard to read for most people. Once you start working with them, it's way easier for you to understand them and work with them and know what they want and what they need and when they're angry. But I'm just curious what your guys' thoughts are. So leave a comment. Let me know if you think that you agree that reptiles have personalities or not. And I'm gonna go get Banba off of me because he's literally shredding my arm to pieces right now. Like, this looks okay, but never underestimate a chameleon clamp. I swear, they are just powerful. So yeah, I'm just gonna wrap all of this up. Thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful day.